In the third year of Ethan Shaw's affair, the long-absent system reappeared, telling me I could go home. For the last 10 days, I stopped arguing and fighting with him. I let him spend his nights away, staying with his mistress. I also allowed him to give her the things I cared about. The day I left was my birthday. He burst in with his mistress, knocking over my cake, and pinned me against the window. He demanded to know why I had harmed their child. "When did you become so vicious?" he asked. I laughed, but couldn't be bothered to explain anymore. "Yes, I am that vicious," I said. "So, you two have a good life together." Then, under his gaze, I turned and jumped from the 19th floor, ending everything in this world for me. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. When the long-absent system finally appeared, telling me I could go home, I had just finished a heated argument with Ethan. He had just returned home after an intimate encounter with Bella Wright, the young mistress he was keeping. Seeing me lying on the bed, he approached and embraced me from behind. His warm lips trailed along my neck, one kiss after another. I sat up abruptly, instinctively slapping him across the face. "Ethan, if you're not disgusted, I certainly am." He froze for a moment, then mockingly touched his face before roughly grabbing me, pinning me in front of the bathroom mirror. He gripped my chin with one hand, his gaze venomous. "You're disgusted by me? Look at yourself, Stella Green. Do you have any resemblance to your former self?" I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My hair was disheveled, one strap of my nightgown hanging off my shoulder, looking like a madwoman. Those eyes, once my most beautiful feature, no longer sparkled with warmth and intelligence. Fine lines had crept across my face, erasing any trace of youthful vitality. In that instant, an image of Bella's youthful, radiant face flashed through my mind. Her bright eyes, burning with desire and ambition, challenging me. "So, Ethan, is this your excuse for cheating?" I sneered, leaning against the wall, my eyes welling up. He slowly approached me, his fingertips gently wiping the corner of my eye. "I've told you more than once, it's just a fling. When I'm bored with it, I'll come back." "Stella, I've always loved you." Disgust. Uncontrollable disgust. I screamed in agony, grabbing a bottle and hurling it at the mirror, shattering it into pieces. "Get out! Get out!" After he left, I stood barefoot on the cold marble floor, staring out the window at the giant LED screen displaying Bella's modeling photo, which Ethan had commissioned. I let out a bitter laugh. Confrontations like today's had played out countless times over the past year. What began as heart-wrenching pain had now devolved into numb despair. I didn't originally belong in this world. 8 years ago, I came to this world on a mission to save Ethan Shaw, a troubled and bitter young man. Back then, his father had an affair, the family business went bankrupt. His mother took her own life, leaving behind massive debts. His eyes were lifeless. It was I who came here, approaching that pitiful young man on a bright, sunny morning. Later, I accompanied him living in a basement flat, sharing meager meals, gradually paying off all the debts. He once asked me, puzzled, "Why are you so kind to me?" I smiled, taking his hand, "Perhaps it's heaven's will." He lowered his head, whispering, "Then it's the best gift heaven has ever given me in this life." On the day my mission was completed, as if sensing I would leave, he held me tightly from behind all night, his eyes red-rimmed. My heart softened, and I hugged him back. "Ethan, I'm not going home." From that moment on, the system disappeared completely. For 5 whole years, it never appeared once. And it was during these 5 years that Ethan cheated, in the 3rd year of our marriage. He kept a young, beautiful aspiring model, Bella Wright. I still remember the day I discovered his infidelity. He came home drunk, hugging me and leaning on my shoulder, mumbling something in his dazed state. "Ella, why have you gotten shorter?" I found it amusing at the time. I've always been 5 feet 5 inches, and people don't suddenly shrink. Later, when I went through his phone, I discovered that Bella, the woman he was keeping, was 5 feet 9 inches. Tall and sexy, completely different from me. And that Ella he uttered, was it really Stella, or was it Bella? I can't recall many details from that day. I only remember the sudden roar in my head as my world turned upside down. Ethan knelt before me, crying and begging, saying he had made a mistake out of curiosity. 3 years of dating, 3 years of marriage, giving up on going home. Only to end up like this. I couldn't accept it, couldn't let us go just like that. So, we silently agreed to maintain our marriage. But our rotten love, a rose infested with maggots. Too precious to throw away yet nauseating to keep. Through his repeated betrayals, we argued and resented each other. Until we were exhausted and heartbroken. Like cutting flesh with a blunt knife, slowly wearing away the last of our love. So when the long-dormant system awoke and spoke to me, I responded immediately. System, I regret it. I want to go home. Host, I warned you that day. What happens after the mission is something no one can predict. Including Ethan's change of heart, the system said. However, given your outstanding performance in previous tasks, I can grant you a special privilege and open a passage home for you once more. But, it will be in 10 days' time. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. All right, you have 10 days left in this world. The countdown to your departure officially begins now. The system disappeared again. The house once more fell into a deathly silence. I wiped away my tears and began to pack up. I no longer wanted to leave any trace of myself in this world. I packed all my clothes and threw them in the bin. Then I took down the wedding photos of Ethan and me from the wall, and retrieved the wedding ring he had given me. On our wedding day, Ethan had knelt before me, holding the 0.7-carat diamond ring that had cost him his entire savings. His voice choked with emotion. Stella, you are the only light in my dark life, he had said. I will be faithful to you alone for the rest of my life. This small 0.7-carat diamond, though modest, carried the most intense love between Ethan and me. I had worn it constantly. Until that day when I saw Bella on his arm, her 5-carat pink diamond glittering brilliantly. From that moment, this ring had been relegated to a drawer. I smashed the ring against the wedding photo, shattering the glass instantly. Finally, I looked around this home filled with traces of my life with Ethan, and suddenly felt a sense of relief. I had been unhappy and struggling in this dysfunctional marriage for 5 years. Now, at last, I could leave. It was a kind of liberation. The next morning, I went downstairs. The room was dimly lit. Ethan was sitting on the sofa, smoking, his expression unreadable. Where's our wedding photo from the wall? He asked quietly, stopping me in my tracks. My phone kept buzzing with incoming messages. It was Bella, sending a picture of herself, holding a newly received bouquet of gold foil roses, her face beaming. Last night was exhausting, but getting this gift has cheered me right up. He noticed but continued to brazenly look at his phone. I've put it away. I replied calmly, walking past him to the kitchen to pour myself a glass of water. He extinguished his cigarette, smirked, and stood up. From his pocket, he produced a high-end Van Cleef & Arpels necklace. He came up behind me and fastened it around my neck. Still angry, he murmured, his breath hot on my ear. Here's a peace offering. It suits you perfectly. Stella, you'll always be Mrs. Shaw. No one can replace you. Not even Bella. When I'm done having my fun, we can try for a baby. How does that sound? I coldly pushed him away, turning to brush off the lipstick stains on his shirt collar. With a sardonic smile, I stepped back and left. Ethan and I once had a child together. But at that time, it was my first pregnancy, and I didn't even know it myself. Back then, I was still obsessed with Ethan's loyalty. Stubbornly waiting outside the hotel where he and Bella were staying, crying all night long. Until dawn, I saw with my own eyes Ethan holding Bella, his hand resting on her bottom as he helped her into the passenger seat. They quickly started making love in the car again. At that moment, gripping the steering wheel, I screamed uncontrollably and crashed into them in a fit of heartbreaking rage. That's when I lost the baby. It was the 4th time I discovered Ethan was still involved with her. Ethan looked a bit surprised but still didn't notice anything unusual. He just nodded thoughtfully and went out again. For 2 consecutive days, he didn't come home. During these 2 days, I watched the endless stream of gossip news about him and Bella. I remained calm, not making a single phone call or sending a single text message. Instead, I took all the properties and jewelry I had accumulated over the years and sold them off. Because the system had told me that I could still exercise my exchange rights. The wealth I had accumulated in this world could be exchanged when I returned to my world. In the first 2 years after our marriage, Ethan had quickly amassed a large fortune through his hard work. As newlyweds, it was the time when our feelings were most intense. All the properties he purchased were put under my name. He said that I had helped him out of the abyss before, and then suffered alongside him all the way, and he felt very guilty. Only by giving me enough money could he feel at ease. In the end, he didn't give me enough love, but he gave me enough money. So much that even if I returned to that world, it would still be enough to splurge for a lifetime. When there were 5 days left on the countdown, I drove to the suburbs. Now, there was only one villa's deed that hadn't been sold. This was the anniversary gift Ethan gave me after our marriage. During our sweet times, we spent all our holidays here, including that child, who was also conceived here. For us, this villa held extraordinary significance. My purpose for coming this time was to take out the deed and sell it to an estate agent. I drove into the villa complex. Since Ethan's affair, I hadn't been back here for 2 whole years. But everything before my eyes was brand new. The small garden outside the villa was full of roses. I got out of the car a bit confused and took out the key to open the door. Unexpectedly, someone also opened the door from inside. "What's up? You want more already after I just fed you?" It was Bella. She was leaning against the door, clad in a red silk nightgown, looking somewhat surprised. But quickly, those moist eyes scanned me up and down, filled with contempt and smugness. In an instant, I understood everything. Ethan had kept her here. "This is my house. I'll give you 5 minutes to get dressed and get out," I said, reaching to open the door. Bella blocked the doorway, her eyes meeting mine without a hint of fear. "But Mr. Shaw has given this flat to me," she said. "Given? When was the deed transferred? How could the property owner not know? It's just a temporary stay. You're like a cuckoo in the nest, thinking you're the real owner?" Bella's face alternated between white and red. I couldn't be bothered to waste words with her and immediately dialed Ethan's number. He could clean up his own mess. On the other end of the line, Ethan let out a light scoff. "Stella, it's just a house. What's wrong with letting the girl stay for a few days? Don't go causing trouble for her, all right? It'll be a pain to console her if she cries." Also, I didn't catch what Ethan said next, because Bella suddenly grabbed my wrist, further provoking me. "Miss Green, I heard you and Mr. Shaw have been together for 3 years. And finally tied the knot. Well, I've also been with Mr. Shaw for 3 years. What do you think? Could I become Mrs. Shaw this year?" She then stroked her belly. "Oh, and I'll add another chip to my steak, the child in my womb." On the other end of the phone, the sound of Ethan shuffling cards came through intermittently. He spoke carelessly. "The other day, a high-quality ice jade necklace went up for auction. I bought it for you. It'll be your birthday gift in a couple of days. I'm just keeping Bella as a bit of entertainment. Look, if you're not happy about it, I'll have her move out." He continued to placate me half-heartedly. I let out a cold laugh, my voice trembling. "Ethan, did you hear that? Your little songbird is expecting a chick. Congratulations, you're going to be a father. Your wish has come true." On the other end of the line, Ethan's voice suddenly went quiet. There was no response for a long while. Ethan found me just as I was leaving the cemetery. By then, I had only 3 days left before my departure. Bella's words had once again reminded me of that child. These past few days, I had visited the child's grave, bringing sweets. I hadn't gone home, nor had I answered Ethan's calls. It was as if I had vanished into thin air. So when Ethan saw me, he grabbed me abruptly and pulled me into his car without a word. Inside the vehicle, he placed both hands on the steering wheel, giving me a deep look before speaking in a husky voice. "I'll sort things out with Bella. Ethan once told me, a child should be born with the person you love most. In this lifetime, I'll only have children with you. Yet now he had gotten Bella pregnant. And here he was, still trying to play the devoted lover with me. I found it laughable, crossing my arms as I looked out the window. What's it got to do with me? It's not my child, after all. His gaze suddenly darkened, but he let out a chuckle, abruptly grabbing my wrist and forcing me to turn back to him. Stella Green, do you truly not care at all? His eyes grew increasingly bloodshot as he stared at me intently, as if afraid to miss any expression on my face. And where have you been these past 2 days? Not even answering your phone? But my face remained devoid of any emotion. I just gave him a faint look, telling him in a very soft voice, Ethan, I'm going home. A deathly silence fell over the air. After a long moment, he let out a cold laugh, as if he'd heard some grand joke, his tone arrogant. Home? Where can you go? You don't have a family home to return to. Besides me, do you have any family left in this world? I gazed at him silently, my eyes tinged with self-mockery. So, this is where love ends, in bitter words. Taking a deep breath, I felt there was no need to say anything more to him and got out of the car. Ethan slammed the steering wheel hard and drove away abruptly. Once again, we parted on bad terms. For the last 3 days, his behavior worsened progressively. Sometimes he would even bring Bella back home for the night, making all sorts of noises. As for me, I simply closed my bedroom door without asking a single question. On the last day before leaving this world, it was my birthday. Early in the morning, Ethan left home without so much as a glance at me. I spent the entire day alone at home, burning all the photos of Ethan and me. Then, I quietly waited for midnight to arrive. In the evening, I bought myself a small cake and carefully placed birthday candles on it. I turned off the lights, closed my eyes, clasped my hands together, and made a wish. I wished for a safe return home and to never see Ethan again. However, before I could blow out the candles, I heard the front door open. Ethan strode in, his face dark with anger. With him was Bella, her face streaked with tears. Before I could react, she slapped me hard across the face. Mrs. Shaw, I know you don't like me. But my baby is innocent. How could you hurt him? I touched my stinging cheek, feeling an urge to laugh bitterly. Honestly, I had no idea what she was talking about. I hadn't been anywhere today. But Bella's slap was clearly encouraged by Ethan's support. Ethan stood to the side, a cigar between his fingers, sneering. Stella, was that really necessary? Just because you can't have children, you had to send someone to run over hers? His words were sharp as a blade, reopening old wounds that had barely healed. But I had no time to argue with him anymore. The system reminded me I only had a few minutes left before departure. I walked straight up to them, ignoring Ethan, and slapped Bella back. This slap was payback for her earlier one, and a reward for being the other woman for 3 years. If I didn't do it now, I'd never have the chance again. Bella looked stunned. When she recovered, she immediately burst into tears and threw herself into Ethan's arms. He rubbed his temples and slowly pulled the tablecloth off. With a loud crash, the sharp sound of breaking dishes echoed through the large house. The cake, along with the plates and cups, shattered all over the floor, just like my 5-year marriage. He walked up to me, pinning me against the windowsill, and roughly grabbed my chin. Beneath his high, arched brows were eyes cold and devoid of emotion. I told you I would handle this. Why did you have to provoke her? Stella, when did you become so vicious and cruel? Or is this another act to make me come back to you? Behind me was the open window. The night view from the 19th floor stretched out, with gusts of wind rushing towards me. At that moment, the clock struck midnight, and the system appeared right on time. The portal home is now open. Once the host completes your death in this alternate world, you may return to your original world. I let out a soft laugh and pushed Ethan's hand away. My tone was gentle. Yes, I am that vicious. Ethan frowned. I reached out, pointing at Bella, and smiled at him. So, I'm stepping aside. You and your Bella can be happy together. Then, under Ethan's watchful gaze, I leaned back and fell from the 19th floor. 5 minutes later, Downstairs, a crowd had gathered. Police and paramedics had arrived. But they couldn't find the alleged victim, nor a body. To be precise, there wasn't even a trace of blood on the ground below. "Mr. Shaw, are you certain Mrs. Shaw jumped from the 19th floor?" A police officer approached Ethan, carefully inquiring. Ethan stood there, head tilted back, his eyes bloodshot, staring at the half-open window on the 19th floor. He let the night rain fall on his face, drop by drop. "I clearly saw her jump. How could this be?" he muttered to himself. "What about other places? Have you checked the second-floor terrace? Could she have landed on someone else's window?" He suddenly thought of these possibilities and turned his head. The police officer nodded helplessly and tried to comfort him. "Mr. Shaw, we've searched everywhere, but there's not a sign of her." At this point, the police didn't know how to handle the case. Both Ethan and Bella claimed to have witnessed Stella leap from the 19th floor. But not a single hair of hers could be found at the scene. It was as if she had vanished into thin air, disappeared from the face of the earth. Bella was terrified by what had just happened. A living person had jumped right before her eyes. Logically, from such a height, she should have been smashed to a pulp. But this person had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Wrapped in a blanket, shivering all over, she walked up to Ethan and gently took his arm. "Let's go home. What happened today is so bizarre. I'm scared." But before she could finish, Ethan's hand struck her face. The slap was much harder than Stella's earlier, making her dizzy and nearly losing her balance. Ethan approached her with a dark expression, the atmosphere around him suddenly chilling. He gripped her chin, forcing her to look him in the eye. "Who told you to slap my wife?" Bella's eyes welled with tears, biting her lower lip hard, looking utterly wronged. "Didn't you say you'd bring me here to confront her?" "I said I'd come to back you up. But as soon as you walked in, you slapped her." "I never agreed to that." His grip tightened, his hand moving from her chin down to her neck. "Bella, if you hadn't insisted on making a scene for the sake of the child in your womb, if you hadn't caused this commotion today, Stella wouldn't have." Bella looked at Ethan before her, his eyes red and bulging, as if he wanted to strangle her. She began to struggle for breath, using her last bit of strength to pry his hand away, barely managing to utter a sentence. "Ethan, I'm carrying your child." The name Ethan reminded him of how Stella used to call him softly in the past. He suddenly came to his senses and released his grip. But the face he saw was entirely different from Stella's. Her face was flushed red, coughing violently. Ethan stood stunned for a moment, looking around at the noisy crowd. Among the diverse faces, the one he longed to see was nowhere to be found. Reality hit him brutally once again. He suddenly remembered that his Ella had leapt from the 19th floor, right before his eyes just 5 minutes ago. Her fate was still unknown. He panicked, stumbling and fleeing awkwardly towards his car. Inside the car, he slumped in the driver's seat, trembling as he lit a cigarette, finally regaining some composure. He stretched out one hand, staring at it blankly. Just moments ago, this very hand had nearly strangled Bella to death in a moment of confusion. Suddenly, he remembered a rainy night many years ago, when he had used the same hand to firmly grip a man's throat. That man was his own father. At 19, his father's affair was exposed by journalists. The Shaw Group was embroiled in scandal, and its stock price plummeted. Yet that man chose to flee with his mistress, transferring all the massive debts to Ethan and his mother. Overnight, Shaw Group went bankrupt, and his mother took her own life in despair. Later, one evening, he cornered the man who was about to escape. Out of control, he gripped his neck, his eyes blazing red. It was Stella who suddenly threw herself at him, grasping his hand. "Ethan, you can't. You mustn't. If you kill him, your life will be ruined." Ethan still remembered how heavy the rain was that night. So heavy that all he could hear was the torrential downpour, and Stella's heart-wrenching cries. Finally, he let go. Stella embraced him, trembling, holding him tighter and tighter. Afterwards, at Stella's urging, he chose to abandon thoughts of murder and revenge for his mother, and began to focus on living well. As time passed, things gradually improved. He finally found evidence of that man's business crimes and personally handed him over to the police. In the end, he took full control of Shaw Group, expanding and strengthening it step by step, saving money bit by bit. Then he married the girl he loved most. Smoke swirled in the car, the glowing cigarette but fell, burning Ethan's hand. He snapped out of his memories with a jolt. His eyes were already wet with tears. It was late at night when Ethan returned home. He had been to the police station, cooperating with their investigation. In the end, all he got was a missing persons report. Without finding Stella's body, the police couldn't issue a death certificate. So they could only classify her as missing for now. "Mr. Shaw, you can come here to exchange this for a death certificate." After she's been missing for 2 years, the officer had said. Ethan collapsed onto the sofa, letting out a bitter laugh as he tossed aside the missing persons report. What death certificate? She's definitely playing some kind of trick on me again. She just wants me to come home. He lowered his gaze to the floor, where the cake he had knocked over earlier still lay. The open window nearby let in a cold draft. Everything around him was a stark reminder that what had just happened was real. His Stella had really jumped from here. Suddenly, he felt a chill run through his entire body. An endless cold crept up from his feet, winding its way up to pierce his heart. He couldn't bear to stay in the living room for another second and fled to the bedroom. Lying dazed on the bed, his mind kept replaying the image of Stella smiling at him before falling backwards. A sudden, intense pain shot through his head. It was so severe that he had to press hard on his temples just to keep it somewhat under control. His migraines were a remnant from years ago. Back then, he was buried under a mountain of debt, working several jobs a day, pushing his body to the limit. But every time he came home from work, there was always the face he longed to see, making him forget how exhausted he was. Thinking back, they were living in the smallest, most run-down basement flat at the time. It leaked in winter and was infested with cockroaches and rats in summer. It could hardly be called a real home. But his Stella never complained once. She made that tiny basement feel cozy and warm. They would lie on the wooden bed, his head in her lap, as she gently massaged his temples. One day, as she was rubbing his temples as usual, he suddenly noticed her hands. Her once smooth, fair skin was now covered in red blisters, some even raw and broken. It was clearly chilblains. In that moment, he felt as if something had carved out a piece of his heart. The pain made him draw in a sharp breath. He still remembered how that night, he had held her hands tenderly, making a solemn vow. "Stella, I promise I'll give you a better life. I swear." Later, he did succeed. He built Shaw Group into a thriving business. He moved with his Stella from the basement flat to an apartment, then to a penthouse, and finally to a mansion. But he lost himself in the intoxication of wealth and the temptation of beauty. Even when Stella discovered his affairs and his kept women, when she fought with him and their arguments shook the heavens, he didn't think there was anything wrong. He was just having some fun. He had been so repressed on his way up. He wanted to indulge in everything new as a form of revenge. All the businessmen around him were the same. Wasn't it normal for a man to keep a mistress on the side, to relieve some stress? He'd never heard of any wife constantly threatening divorce over it, let alone attempting suicide. He couldn't understand. If only she had been willing, she would have remained Mrs. Shaw forever and ever. How did it come to this point of life and death uncertainty? But Ethan seemed to have forgotten that back then. The reason he worked so hard to make money and climb out of the mire was so that he could be with his Stella forever, loving each other until they were old and gray. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on my familiar bed. My head was still throbbing slightly. Outside the window, a gentle drizzle continued to fall, just as it had when I leapt from the 19th floor. My heart tightened, and I quickly pushed open the window. What greeted my eyes was the old neighborhood street, filled with the aroma of street food and bustling with people buying snacks. I suddenly felt a wave of relief wash over me. Beside me, my phone chimed with a notification. Your bank account has been credited with £80 million. A full £80 million. I clutched my phone tightly, raising my head in sudden realization. Everything I had experienced before wasn't a dream, it was all real. 8 years ago, while I was out working, I had accidentally fallen from a great height, injuring my spine and leaving me paralyzed from the waist down, confined to bed. That night, the system appeared for the first time, promising to reward me with a healthy body if I could complete a redemption task. I agreed. And so began the 8 years that belonged to Ethan and me. Now, I had returned to my own world once again. Not only did I have a healthy body once more, but I had also acquired immense wealth. In this world, there would be no more endless arguments and conflicts. No more nights of crying alone, soaking my pillow in loneliness. No more suffocating marriage that felt like drowning every minute. I took a deep breath, my eyes moistening. The feeling of freedom. It felt so good. My life in the real world hasn't changed much. The only difference, perhaps, is that my bank account now holds more money than I could spend in a lifetime, granting me complete financial freedom. In between my busy work schedule, I've taken to traveling and holidaying alone. Sometimes it's the misty countryside of the southern region. Other times it's the desolate expanses of the Northern Territory. Each landscape captivates me endlessly. I've even bought a terraced house by the lake. From the floor-to-ceiling windows in my bedroom, I can see the shimmering surface of the lake. On days when I'm not traveling, I lazily curl up in the hanging chair in my bedroom, basking in the sunlight and reading. My cat occasionally jumps onto my lap, purring contentedly. There's no one to greet me with a cold face when I return home. No one to shout and argue with me. And certainly no one to pinch my cheeks and force me to look at what a mess I've become in the mirror. These days, I've taken the time to nurture myself properly. I've regained the bright, relaxed Stella Green the first once was. Everything in reality is good. In a world without Ethan Shaw, every day is sunny. 2 years later, I had almost forgotten that memory. Until that day, I had just finished drinking and chatting with my friends, and was lying in bed at home, feeling a bit fuzzy. The system contacted me again. When I heard the system's voice once more, I thought I had drunk too much and misheard. Until that white light reappeared before my eyes. Host, I'm very sorry to disturb you. But there's no other way. Because I used my special privilege to let you return home. The male lead Ethan Shaw still hasn't found your body and can't accept this fact. As his inner obsession deepens, the world he's in is about to collapse. If the alternate world collapses, I as the system will be punished with permanent sealing and deletion. Please help me by going back one more time to completely dispel the obsession in his heart. This time you don't need to complete any tasks. And you won't stay there permanently. Your time limit for this return is only 5 short hours. When the 5 hours are up, no matter the result, I will bring you back home. The system showed me some glimpses of Ethan's life over these 2 years. During this time, he went to work as normal, handling company matters. But his temperament became more volatile, with employees on edge every day, afraid of making mistakes. Even the vases in his office had been replaced dozens of times. Occasionally when business partners mentioned my death in front of him, or even tried to introduce women to him, he would stare at them with an extremely cold gaze, warning them word by word that I was not dead. This scared people so much they would look at each other in dismay and flee. Afterwards, he would still ask his assistant if I had sent him any messages today. I fell silent. I didn't feel much more moved, but rather felt numb. But hearing the system's almost pleading voice, thinking of how it had accompanied lonely me for 8 years in the alternate world, completing tasks. Even when it went dormant at the end, it was only because it heard my call for help that it opened the special privilege to send me home, regardless of consequences. Not quite friends, but more than friends. After careful consideration, I still agreed. Back then, my farewell with Ethan had indeed been rather hasty. At that time, it was a sea of hatred and emotions. Even the parting was tinged with some resentment. Not hesitating to die in the most tragic way in front of him. To the extent that he still can't let go even now. So this time, let me completely cut off his thoughts and make him give up hope entirely. Opening my eyes once again, I had returned to that world, the home Ethan and I once shared. It was already late, the house was dark with no lights on, silent and empty. After 2 years, I had almost forgotten everything here. But everything in this house vividly reminded me. I had once lived in this place for a full 8 years. The layout of the house had never changed, always maintaining the way it was before I left. Even the wedding photo I had scratched with my diamond ring had been restored by Ethan and rehung on the living room wall. Except that because of my departure, my half had become blank. Walking into the bedroom, my pillow was still placed side by side with Ethan's, as if I had never left. Even my favorite book was quietly lying by the bedside where I used to keep it. I picked up the book and opened it. The yellowed pages, slightly curled edges, each page bearing traces of being turned countless times. The system had told me that after I left, on every night Ethan had trouble sleeping, he relied on this book to fall asleep. Because with my disappearance, everything related to me disappeared, including my clothes, personal photos, etc. Only this book he bought at the bookstore remained, with my markings becoming the only trace that I had ever existed. Just as I was lost in thought, suddenly, there was the sound of the door opening at the entrance. Ethan had come home. After 2 years apart, his distinct features had become even sharper, the gloom between his brows blending with the solemn and gloomy winter outside the window. He changed his shoes, entered the house, didn't even turn on the lights, and didn't notice I was in the bedroom. In the dim living room, he went straight to the sofa, skillfully lit a cigarette. Sparks flickered between his fingers, occasionally blown bright and dim by the wind. As the cigarette burned out between his fingers, he picked up his phone, frowning as he browsed through the day's messages. In the past, when he was out socializing, he would always complain that my messages were annoying, and was in the habit of reading but not replying to me. Later, I gradually stopped sending messages, gradually stopped looking forward to when he would come home. He supported his forehead with one hand. It's been 2 years, Stella, you're really cruel. Not even a single message. How long do you intend to play this game before you're satisfied? He impatiently turned off his phone, let out a long sigh, and turned his gaze towards the window. In his dim eyes was a dead stillness. Suddenly, the ringtone of his phone broke the silence of the night. He looked at the caller ID on the screen, hesitated for a moment, but still answered the call. Mr. Shaw, it's been 2 full years since Mrs. Shaw went missing. We're reminding you again that you can come to the police station to get a death certificate. Ethan's face tensed, the depths of his dark eyes concealing turbulent waves, the air pressure around him instantly dropping to freezing. My wife is not dead. None of you have found her body, yet you tell me she's dead. This kind of trick, I will never believe. His hand gripping the phone tightened, veins bulging. If anyone calls me again telling me to get a death certificate, I'll go get their death certificate. He abruptly hung up the phone, throwing it violently onto the ground. His fist slammed onto the coffee table, causing the sound of glass shattering. Lowering his head deeply, his voice hoarse. Stella, how long do you want to punish me before you'll come back? I silently watched his performance, only finding it somewhat laughable. What did he want me to come back for? To continue watching him and his Bella shamelessly entangled? Or to continue watching helplessly as the shadows on me grew deeper and deeper, until they devoured me whole? After a long while, I walked out of the bedroom, speaking coldly. Why continue to deceive yourself, Ethan Shaw? Hearing my voice, Ethan Shaw's body trembled for a moment. He slowly turned around and saw me. His entire being froze. He stared blankly for a long time. The light in his eyes gradually brightened. He walked forward gently, as if afraid to disturb this dream, and very carefully reached out his hand, inch by inch, until he fully embraced me. He buried his face in my neck, inhaling deeply, and spoke hoarsely. Stella, you really scared me. They all said you were dead, but I didn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. You see, I've finally waited for you to come back. I coldly pushed him away, looking into his eyes without a trace of emotion. Ethan, I did die. Don't you remember? 2 years ago, I jumped from the 19th floor right in front of you. With my blessings for you and Bella, I fell under your gaze. His long eyelashes trembled, and he seemed a bit lost. He finally seemed to realize that I had indeed died in front of him 2 years ago. One moment I was speaking softly to him. The next I was falling backwards from the 19th floor. Without any hesitation or lingering. Just like that, I disappeared from his world. Ethan's face suddenly turned paper white. His hands trembling uncontrollably as he gripped my shoulders. No, it's impossible. Stella, you're clearly standing right here, you've clearly come back. After you left, I made Bella lose the baby. I don't contact her anymore, I don't see her anymore. Stella, can we just live our lives together, please? I shook my head, looking at him calmly. Standing by the window I had once jumped from. I opened it, feeling the cold night wind, almost the same as 2 years ago. Ethan, do you remember how we met? 8 years ago, I was brought to this world by the system. I appeared out of thin air in front of the down-and-out Ethan. At that time, he had just lost his mother and had been threatened and beaten by debt collectors. He was standing on a high rooftop, with one foot already stepping out. It was I who fell from the sky, knocking him to the ground. Propping myself up on top of him. Looking at the young man with a face full of despair, I smiled and said to him, "Don't you dare jump. I have a way to help you." Only then did a glimmer of light appear in his lifeless eyes, a spark of life. At that time, his heart was like dead ashes, and he didn't notice how I had arrived. Now, thinking back carefully, his face gradually showed shock and confusion. Ethan, I'm not even from your world. I came to you only to complete the task of saving you. When the task was over, I should have left, returned to my own world. But that year, I didn't. Because I loved you, so I stayed, and married you. I gazed out the window, seeing the stars twinkling in the night sky. They were as bright as on our wedding night. Ethan held me close, making a promise. Stella, you saved my life. You changed my destiny. If I ever wrong you, may I be hit by a car the moment I step outside. I swear I'll give you a good life. I believed him and gave myself completely to this man. Later, he expanded Shaw Group, fulfilling his promise to make me the glamorous Mrs. Shaw. I no longer had to struggle alongside him. I just needed to wait for him at home. But our conversations grew fewer, and he began staying out all night. In the end, I didn't find happiness. I found headlines about him keeping a mistress, Bella Wright, a model. From that moment, a rift formed between us. Through repeated arguments, that rift grew wider until it became the chasm it is today. With me on one side and him on the other. Never to meet again. As memories flooded back, pain etched across Ethan's face. Stella, I'm sorry. You were always by my side, no matter what I became. You never left me. I was too content, too confident. That's why I started looking for excitement elsewhere. At that time, I could have anything I wanted. Suddenly, I wasn't satisfied with our quiet daily life. I wanted to try everything I hadn't experienced before. Including women. He lowered his head, hands clenched tight. I never thought you'd leave. I thought after 8 years together, you were dispensable in my life. But since that night you fell from the window in front of me, I haven't had a full night's sleep. He looked up, trembling, reaching out to hold my hand. Stella, I was wrong. I was so wrong. I coldly shook him off. Ethan, 2 years ago, when you pressed me against the mirror and said I was old, that I didn't look anything like I used to, you didn't hesitate or show any remorse. I'll never forget the pleasure and excitement on his face when he embraced Bella, whispering in her ear. Nor will I forget his contemptuous indifference during our every argument. Those scenes that made me look like a madwoman are hard to forget. Love is like tending a flower. He poisoned me drop by drop with his infidelity and betrayal. He made me wither. Ethan's eyes were red-rimmed, almost bleeding with emotion. No, it wasn't like that. I just lost my head when we argued. I didn't know. Stella, you've always been the only one I love. Ethan, you keep saying you never cared for Bella. Is that really true? You gave her money, time, and affection. If that's not love, what is it? You say you love me, but is your love coldness, arguments, or confrontation? If that's what it is, I don't want that kind of love at all. He claimed he never cared for Bella, that it was just a fling. But he gave her money, took her shopping in Europe, buying jewelry and luxury goods without batting an eye. He gave her time, personally taking her to the doctor when she was ill, staying by her side when she was afraid of thunder. He even gave her love, always making me back down in our arguments, protecting his little bird. All those years, all those moments of passion, how could he not have cared? At this point, Ethan was on his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. I glanced at the time. Only 1 minute left of the 5 hours. Ethan seemed to sense something was amiss, realizing I was about to leave again. He saw me lean against the window edge once more and reached out, trembling, trying to hold on to me. "Stella, don't leave me, don't abandon me." In my ears, the system had already started the countdown. "Ethan, I came back for these last 5 hours. Because we only truly loved each other for 5 years. We loved each other once, but now we don't love anymore." Somehow, Ethan had exchanged 5 years of our time together for my brief 5-hour return. But it was only 5 hours. There was no more love left to sustain us for even a second longer. The time portal opened again. I looked at Ethan one last time. His tears fell onto my hand, burning hot. 8 years ago, when he cared for me most, his tears were just as hot. "Ethan, goodbye. We'll never meet again." "Stella, no." With those words, I vanished completely before Ethan's eyes once more, leaving him alone, kneeling in our vast home, weeping uncontrollably. After Stella left, Ethan collapsed on the floor where she had disappeared, staring motionlessly at the ceiling. 2 years ago, Stella had mysteriously vanished before his eyes. He could still deceive himself then, thinking that without finding her body, she couldn't be dead. But now, he knew Stella would never return. He would never be able to wait for her in this world again. He and Stella had spent 8 long years together. The most precious time of his life, he had spent with her. It was her arrival that made him believe in love again and taught him how to love bit by bit. His original life plan was to marry Stella, have a child, and live happily ever after. He had achieved the first goal, marrying Stella. But ironically, fate sometimes is just a dash. And after starting a new line in their love story, it was no longer the ending they had hoped for. All the beauty came to an abrupt end in the 3rd year of their marriage. When that ambitious young model clung to him, he inexplicably asked for her name. Bella Wright. Bella. Stella. That night, he kept her. Later, he continued to do many things he couldn't understand himself. By the time he came to his senses, there was no turning back for them. He remembered that he and Stella once had a child too. Unfortunately, before he could experience the joy of being a father, that child was lost due to his betrayal. Later, Bella told him he was going to be a father again. At first, he was delighted, even a bit flustered. The joy of new life clouded his judgment, to the extent that he actually believed Bella's words, thinking it was Stella who had sent someone to kill their child. It was that moment of confusion that caused Stella to leap from the 19th floor, disappearing from his life for 2 whole years. Later, when he finally came to his senses, he learned that it was all Bella's lie to gain his favor. He panicked, so much so that he dragged Bella to the operating table and personally terminated their child. He only hoped Stella could forgive him. Afterwards, Bella came to him crying more than once, accusing him of being heartless, making her unable to ever become a mother. He just smiled down at her condescendingly. "From the moment you chose to be my mistress, you should have expected this kind of ending." He did all this to atone, to let Stella, hiding in the shadows, see that he truly regretted his actions. But after waiting for 2 years, what he got was not reconciliation, but the final blow to his heart. After who knows how long, Ethan crawled up from the floor and slowly walked to the wide-open window. Looking down, pitch black, like an abyss. But his Stella had jumped down from here so resolutely, without a trace of hesitation. He spread his arms and closed his eyes, feeling the night breeze rustling. She said if she jumped, she would go home. If he jumped, would he be able to see her too? A moment later, without any hesitation, he leapt down, ending his life at 26 years old. And with his death, The redemption mission for the male lead Ethan Shaw was completely over. The alternate world resumed its normal operation. The system heaved a sigh of relief. And with a rumbling sound, it initiated a new round of mission cycles.